Hello and welcome to this installment of Prime RC. In this one right here, we have Ugly Duckling back on the table, and we are going to be looking at putting a set of gears in Ugly Duckling. If you remember this truck, when it started out, it was an unloved SCX10 that I'd picked up for cheap, and whenever I cleaned it up and rebuilt it, the gears and the transmission looked good. They are the plastic gears, and I've left them in there all this time. They seem to be holding up, but as many of you know, the SCX10 gears are basically just a hand grenade waiting to go off. So we're going to upgrade those plastic gears with a set of metal gears. Usually I go with hot racing gears, but this time I decided to try something a little bit different. I came across these Xtra Speed gears, and these are about half the price of the hot racing gears. I know what you're thinking, half the price, probably going to get what I pay for, but I've had really good luck out of Xtra Speed products in the past. So I decided to give these a try. These right here were about 20 bucks shipped, and they came with a metal spur gear, with a slipper eliminator, and a metal pinion gear. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I only plan on using the transmission internal gears. I don't like metal spur gears because I like to have a soft point for if something breaks, that's something easy to replace, and I don't like doing away with the slipper. So, these right here I'll throw aside, and also in this truck right here, I have changed the gearing. It's no longer stock because I do run 3S in it. So I have adjusted gearing accordingly for that. So the spur gear will not work for me in that. So I'll throw them in my box. Never know when I may need them, or maybe trading fodder farther on down the road. But I am going to give the metal gears a try. So let's open up this kit and see what's inside of it, shall we? Here we have the parts that make up the kit. I must apologize because in the beginning I said that it included a slipper eliminator. It does not. It does include a slipper. But like I said, once again, I don't like a metal spur gear. I like to have something that gives, and I don't like the weight of a metal spur gear. But here's the rest of the components. Let's go ahead and take them out of the bag here. Here is the lower gear. Interesting that it has these bronze style bushings on them. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if they're there for spacers or if they're supposed to be the bearings or what. It is just on a shaft. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out whenever we get in the transmission, won't we? I think you're maybe just supposed to be spacers, but we'll see. Nice piece though. Very well machined. Take up the rest of the gears. Here's the gear that made out of plastic usually goes bad in the SCX10 transmission. Here it is in some nice heavy duty metal. It is also very well machined. Nice little counter gear there. Top shaft gear, nicely made as well. Of course, we do have a pinion gear here. How many tooth is this pinion? It is not written on it, so I'm not sure if it's stock or not. You have to count them to find out. Rest of your slipper assembly. Included a new top shaft and all the hardware for it. I'm not sure if you have to use that with their top shaft gear or not, or just if you're going to use their slipper. Hopefully we don't need that, but we shall see. So let's get started. First thing we have to do is remove the body. And then I'm going to go ahead and unhook the motor now, because I have to remove the transmission, and this makes it easier to go ahead and do it now than with the transmission flopping around. And we're going to go ahead and replace this motor too while we're at it this time. So I'm going to flip the truck over now, because now we have to remove the transmission. 4 screws on the bottom and the transmission will drop right out. And the last screw, go ahead and grab the transmission. Hold with one hand, pull up on the truck with the other. The drive shafts will slide apart and out. And there we go. We now have the transmission out. I'm going to give you a little tip right now. Anytime you take a transmission out of an SCX10, go ahead and make sure the drive shafts right here, this part of the drive shaft, is still tight. You can do that by just taking a Allen key or a driver, sliding it up inside the drive shaft, into the screw in the middle, and give it a twist. Just make sure it's tight, because these right here have a tendency to work loose. They'll work loose right here and will fall apart on you out in the trail if you don't do that routine maintenance there on them. So I've actually had them before where I've checked them and they've been just maybe a couple threads still holding them. So they'll work loose and you won't know it until it's too late. Luckily that one seemed tight. How about the bun on the back? Check them on both axles and on the transmission as well. Yep, that one's good. So just a little preventative maintenance to make your life easier and to keep you from getting stranded. And now we start disassembling transmission. Remove the cover. After we remove the cover, we'll remove the drive shafts. Now we remove the drive shafts. If you have different length drive shafts, make sure you put them back on the right side, just to make your life easier. Like in this case right here, the long one goes towards the rear. Always after I pull the drive shafts, always put the pins back in so I don't lose them. Now we're just going to remove the motor. Set it aside. Make sure you don't lose these screws because you'll need them to put the motor back in, or to put in my case, the new motor. Now before we tear into the inside of this transmission, it's a good time to go ahead and clean it up on the outside if it's dirty. You can do a bunch of different ways. Toothbrush and solvent works good. This one's actually not too dirty, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to spray some alcohol on a paper towel and wipe off the outside. This truck doesn't see a lot of mud, so there's not a lot of grime buildup. My Project Cheap Bolt is more my trail truck, so it sees all the water, the mud, and the muck. Okay, so we're going to start by removing. Now we're going to start by removing the slipper. Make sure you remember what order these parts went on with. If possible, just remove them all in one chunk. Go ahead and clean up pieces as you take them out. No harm in that. Now we're going to start pulling the screws out here to take the motor mount and the gear cover backing plate off the case. And now the motor plate should have fallen off in your hand. If not, just quickly pop off it comes. Set it aside, as well as the spur gear cover. If you have any dirt and grime behind it or down in here, good time cleaning it up. And now the last bolt. Now, we are ready to separate these transmission halves. But before I do, I'm going to put on a set of rubber gloves. You do not have to, but I'm going to because I know this transmission is full of grease because I'm the one that greased it. If you're doing this to a bone stock axial transmission from Axial that you know has never been greased, more than likely it's almost the same thing as dry anyway, so you don't really have to worry about it. But like I said, I know this one's full of grease, so I'm taking a precaution. I'm going to set me aside a paper towel to lay my greasy innards on. So now we separate the halves just by pulling them apart. It's always a gamble of which side the gears will stay in. As you can tell, they decided to separate there. So I'm just going to dump them out over here. And now we're just going to wipe out the inside of the case. While you're in here, look at the bearings. Make sure everything looks good in here. Make sure there's no cracks in the case, nothing like that. You don't have to wipe out the grease unless it looks nasty and filthy. This actually looks pretty good overall. It's just, I want a nice clean base for the new gears. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all this out. It's a good time too to wipe off all the bearings. And look over them, make sure there's spin them in your hand, make sure there's no crunching in them. Make sure they spin smoothly and freely. Because right now is the best time to replace them is while you have it apart. Better to do it now than have to come back and disassemble it later to replace them then. So I'm going to get most of the grease out. I'm not going to get it all out because this is pretty good grease in here. Actually, because it hasn't been really that many miles ago since this has been greased. Okay, I've got the cases cleaned up. I've got all the bearings cleaned up and checked out. We're now ready to start reassembly. We got the old stock top shaft here. We are now about to find out if the Xtra Speed gear will fit the stock shaft or if I have to use their shaft. Perfect fit. It's good to know. Here's the stock gear, by the way. The perfect fit. Makes me very happy. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop it here into the case. Just to keep it out of the way for now. Now comes the lower gear. Has these little slider pieces on here, these little brass pieces, bronze pieces, whatever they are. I figured out what they're for. They are so they'll fit into the bearings. If you notice, the stock one here has these raised pieces here machined into it. So that's what these are for. So that way they can just slide right into the bearings. Hopefully. Yep, like so. So what we're going to do now before we put in the next gear is I'm going to go ahead and pull these back out so I can grease them up. And just so you can see here that this right here is not all one piece. It uses a pin on the middle of the shaft to hold the outdrives in. I know there was some question online about that. I am probably a little more friendly with the grease than you are, and you know what? That's okay. You put on the amount that you feel comfortable with. As far as type of grease, once again, I'm using my trusty marine grease because I like it because it stays on the gears, and if I find water, it will help repel the water. Be prepared for this to be a mess. You'll get some outside the case, but that's okay. We can just go and wipe it off once we get that far. Now comes the center gear. We're going to have to go and take the bearings out of this one. There's the bearings put into the new counter gear. So now we'll just throw just a little bit of grease on this, just on one side. And we will drop it into place. Like so. We'll go ahead and pull the top shaft and grease it up. And it goes. Okay, so now we will just take the two halves and push them together. If all goes well, it should just snap into place. If all goes well, these two halves should line up nicely. And they do. Perfect. And it spins freely. Okay, so now we're just going to take a paper towel and clean up this a little bit, just so we don't make a bigger mess. I clean up a lot just because it's easier to do it now than to get it all over everything. And there we go. And now to reassemble this, I'm going to get rid of all these dirty paper towels. And I'm also going to get rid of the gears, put them in a baggie and keep those because you never know when I might need them again. And I'm going to go ahead and change my gloves. And now all we have to do is put the hardware back in. I got some new hardware out because I'm going to replace the stock hardware with stainless steel hardware from K&K. You can use the stock or you can go with stainless steel, whatever, it's totally up to you. I'm going to go with the stainless steel just because I like the look, durability, and I like the fact it doesn't rust. So, start by putting in the short one here first. If some grease might come out, just go ahead and wipe it off the end if it does. No big deal, right? Now, on this right here, it's important to note, snug it down, but don't tighten it. Okay? Because you want to tighten all four of them at the same time. You're going around, snugging it evenly, so your case doesn't come out crooked. There we go, just enough to hold it. That's all. And next up, we put on the backing plate for the spur gear. Line it up like so. And then we take our backing plate for the motor and we drop it into place. Just put your hardware in. And once again, once it gets to the other side, you don't want to tighten it. You just want to go through. My rule of thumb is just till the head reaches the case. Now stop. Repeat that for the other two screws. Now it's time to start tightening them. Just go around the case, tightening them down. Yeah, just a little bit at a time. I don't like to go overboard because if you tighten up the case too much, you will get binding on the axial plastic case. If you have a metal case, it's not as likely. I do not have a metal case on this transmission, so we have to be a little more careful. Pretty sure now the bottom one's good. I'm going to just check the top ones again, give them just a little bit more. You can feel them getting tight. you'll know what's too tight. If you really have to give them a lot of power and torque, that's too tight. Get that grease popping in there. Go ahead now and slide on the cone, your slipper, spring, the nut, and tighten down your slipper clutch. Do this based on your preferences. Me, myself, I like tightening down the slipper clutch all the way, and then usually I'll back off about 1/3 of a turn. Some people go quarter, some go half. For me, it's about 1/3. Tighten down all the way. Then there we go. There's some noise in there, but that is common from metal gears. Especially whenever they're brand new. They will quiet up a little bit as they wear in. There is no crunchiness or nothing like that, so that's good. Okay, next step is we need to mount the motor. Our motor of choice is this motor right here. It's a custom build jobby, 27 turn by a local guy. Everybody calls these Wallace Specials. If you're interested in one, let me know. Maybe I can hook you up with it. Great motor right here. So we're going to go ahead and put this motor in this transmission just the same way as the old one came out. When it comes to setting your motor mesh, use the method that works best for you. Some people use a piece of paper between the pinion and spur. Some just eyeball it. I kind of do both. I use a piece of paper to kind of set it, and then eyeball to make sure it looks good. What you want is just a little bit of rock between the two before engagement, just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and set my mesh now. I use a piece of paper, push down gently against the two, tighten down the screws, I remove the piece of paper, and I look at my mesh. Just a bit too tight. So now I'll just loosen the screw just a little bit. You don't want to loosen them up too much. And then I'll just give it just a little bit of a wiggle, just a little bit. This way, by not loosening it up very much, it lets me move the motor, but I gotta really struggle to move it. There we go. I can feel just a little bit of play before the gears start to engage. That's what I want. I'm happy with it right there, so now I just tighten it down. And now my mesh is set. Now we just gotta put the cover back on. Helps if I use the right tool. I went ahead though and lubed the bearing behind the pinion gear on this motor and the one in the brush hood on the back of the armature. It's easier to go ahead and do it now while it's out of the truck than to do it later. You should take care of the bearings in your motor. It'll lead for a longer, happier life, especially if it's a rebuildable motor. With a sealed can, you should still go ahead and oil those bushings, especially if you run a lot of water and stuff. Afterwards, you should just give them a little spray. A little squirt of something to help protect them and keep them happy. Okay, our transmission is about ready to put back in the truck. I will actually put the drive shafts in the transmission after I get the transmission back in the truck. Okay, next step, we put on the drive shafts. Remember which drive shaft went where. That's very important there. For us, the short one faces towards the front. And now the rear one, put it on. You did make sure these screws in here were tight, right? Okay, tighten them down, make sure they are tight. I have lost one of these on the trail before. It is not pleasant. We bent up an E-clip and shoved in it to get us home. Or a body clip, I mean. Okay, now we're ready to put this transmission in the truck. So let's get the truck back on the table. First thing you want to do is go ahead and insert your drive shaft halves into your drive shafts. You can do it on either end, transmission or axles, doesn't matter. And now we're going to have to put this transmission under the truck and feed it up so that these drive shafts line up and we can get them into the drive shafts on the axles. Remember, you want to line that paint pen mark, rotate it if you have to, around to where you can see it. You want to line that up with the one on the axles. Like that. And for back here, like that. Okay, now we need to work the transmission over to where it mounts. You just have to keep eyeballing it till you get it there. Once you see that hole line up, grab one of the screws for the transmission. And try to get it started. You don't want to snug it down all the way, just enough to hold the transmission. Because that way it'll give you a little bit of wiggle room to get the other screw holes lined up. Now just tighten down all the screws. Just do not over tighten these. You have to be careful because if you over tighten them, you will strip out the case. If you do strip out the case, there is a few little fixes for that. You can always just drill a little bit bigger. Always change the thread of the screw. A couple options there. You make inserts you can get for that. Okay, there we go. Transmission is now happily back home in our truck. Only thing left to do is hook the motor back up, and then we will be ready to run. We still need to neaten up our wiring, but otherwise this install is complete. We are ready to go and hit the trails or the next comp. I'm not going to neaten up the wiring because I think it's time to replace the speed controller next. So I'm just going to decide on what that is, and maybe I'll do that before the next time I run the truck. So if not, I'll neaten up the wiring, then run the truck. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them below. Feel free to like this video, subscribe so you don't miss any other upgrades to Ugly Duckling. This has been a nice, fun truck that's come a long ways from a neglected SCX10 to be actually one of my favorite trucks. It's almost my favorite truck now. Not quite, but almost. So, like I said, hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it useful. I recommend these gears. They went in nice and easy. They fit perfectly. So, a great addition to this truck. A great addition to any truck, really, because that plastic counter gear will fail you at some point. If you're running a plastic one, you're just running on borrowed time, to be honest about it. So until next time, happy RCing.